Zelda Harper had learned to measure her worth by what others discarded. And on that scorching August morning in 1873, she stood at the edge of Independence, Missouri, with nothing but borrowed dreams and a dress that had belonged to 3 different women before her. The hem dragged in the dust, frayed and yellowed with age. The bodice pulled too tight across her shoulders because her oldest sister had been smaller, and the sleeves hung loose because her middle sister had been thinner. The fabric, once perhaps a cheerful blue, had faded to the color of dishwater, patched at the elbows with material that did not quite match. She was 20 years old, and she could not remember a single day when she had worn something made just for her, something that fit her body, instead of hanging like a costume meant for someone else's life. Her parents had died when she was 15, victims of cholera that swept through their small farm outside Independence. Her 2 older sisters had taken her in, but charity had its limits. They had their own families, their own struggles, and Zelda had learned quickly that gratitude meant never asking for more than what was offered. She worked for her keep, cleaning houses in town, taking in laundry, doing whatever odd jobs would earn her enough to buy bread and not be a burden. The dresses she wore were the ones her sisters no longer wanted, or the ones their daughters had outgrown, and she accepted them with thanks that she mostly meant. Independence thrived as a jumping-off point for wagon trains heading west, and the streets bustled with activity, even in the brutal summer heat. Zelda made her way down the wooden sidewalk toward Mrs. Peterson's boarding house, where she helped with the cooking and cleaning 3 times a week. The sun beat down mercilessly, and she could feel sweat trickling down her back, the ill-fitting dress clinging uncomfortably to her skin. She was passing the general store when she collided with what felt like a wall of solid muscle. Strong hands caught her shoulders, steadying her before she could stumble backward. Zelda looked up, and up further still, into a face that seemed carved from the mountains themselves. The man standing before her was enormous, easily 6.5 feet tall, with shoulders so broad they blocked out the sun. His arms, bare beneath a worn leather vest, were corded with muscle, and his chest strained against a faded cotton shirt. Dark hair fell past his shoulders, tied back loosely with a leather cord, and his face was all hard angles softened only slightly by a thick beard. But it was his eyes that caught her, held her. They were the color of pine forests, green and deep and surprisingly gentle for a man who looked like he could wrestle bears. "Madam," he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to resonate in her chest. "You all right?" Zelda stepped back quickly, her face flushing. "Yes, I am sorry. I was not watching where I was going." He released her shoulders but did not move away, studying her face with an intensity that made her want to look down at her worn boots. Instead, she forced herself to meet his gaze, lifting her chin with what little pride she had left. "No harm done," he said. His eyes traveled down, not with the leering assessment she sometimes encountered from men in town, but with something else. Concern, perhaps. His gaze lingered on her dress, on the way it hung wrong, the patches and faded fabric. "You sure you are all right? You look like you might fall over from the heat." "I am fine," she said, though truthfully, the combination of the sun and his unexpected proximity was making her feel lightheaded. "I need to get to work." She moved to step around him, but he spoke again. "Name's Samuel Reeves." "Most folks call me Sam." She paused, good manners warring with the need to keep moving to not be late. "Zelda Harper. Pretty name." He nodded toward the boarding house down the street. "You work for Mrs. Peterson." "Sometimes, and I take in laundry and clean for several families in town." She did not know why she was telling him this. "I should go." This time when she moved past him, he let her, but she could feel his eyes on her back as she hurried down the sidewalk. Her heart was beating too fast, and she told herself it was just from the heat, from the surprise of the collision, and not at all from the way his hands had felt on her shoulders or the surprising gentleness in those forest green eyes. Samuel Reeves watched Zelda Harper disappear into the boarding house, something twisting in his chest that he had not felt in longer than he cared to remember. He had come down from his cabin in the mountains west of Independence 3 days ago to trade furs and restock supplies, as he did every few months. At 32, he had been living alone in those mountains for the better part of a decade, preferring the company of trees and wildlife to the complications of civilization. But something about the woman in the threadbare dress had struck him with the force of a lightning bolt. It was not just her obvious poverty, though that tugged at something protective in his nature. It was the way she had held her head high despite the shabby clothing, the dignity in her voice, the flash of intelligence in her blue eyes. She was beautiful in a quiet way that snuck up on a man, all delicate features and golden hair that caught the sunlight despite being pulled back in a severe bun. And that dress. Samuel had grown up with 3 sisters before they had all married and moved away, before he had taken to the mountains. He knew enough about women's clothing to recognize a garment that had been worn by too many people for too long. The patches, the poor fit, the way she had to keep hitching up the sagging bodice. It made something in him angry, though he could not have said exactly why or at whom. He turned back to the general store, where he had been loading his purchases onto his pack mule. But instead of finishing, he found himself walking back inside, the proprietor looking up from the counter with surprise. "Forget something, Sam. Got any fabric?" Samuel asked. The proprietor, a round man named Jenkins, raised his eyebrows. "You taking up quilting?" Samuel ignored the attempt at humor. "Just tell me if you have fabric." Sure. Wife's got bolts in the back. What are you looking for?" Samuel tried to picture Zelda Harper, to imagine what would suit her. Something blue. Sky blue, maybe. Good quality cotton, nothing fancy, but something that will wear well. Jenkins disappeared into the back room, and Samuel stood at the counter feeling foolish. What was he planning to do? Ride up to a woman he had just met and hand her a bolt of fabric? But the image of that dress, hanging wrong on her frame, would not leave his mind. Jenkins returned with several bolts of fabric. "Got this nice calico, this gingham, and this plain blue cotton." The cotton's good quality came from St. Louis just last month. The plain blue cotton was perfect, the color of a clear summer sky. Samuel ran his rough hand over the fabric, finding it sturdy but soft. "How much for a full bolt? More than most folks want to spend. How much?" Samuel repeated. Jenkins quoted a price that made Samuel wince internally, but he nodded. Then, thinking, he added, "You got thread and needles. Good ones." By the time he finished, he had purchased not just the fabric but everything needed for sewing, along with a few other items that came to mind. Jenkins packed everything carefully, watching Samuel with open curiosity, but wise enough not to ask too many questions. Sam Reeves was known in Independence as a fair man, but one who valued his privacy. He brought good furs to trade, caused no trouble, and then disappeared back into the mountains for months at a time. Samuel loaded the packages onto his mule, his mind already working through the logistics. He had learned to sew from his mother and sisters, had made his own shirts and mended his own clothes for years now out of necessity. But making a dress for a woman was different. He would need measurements. He would need to see Zelda Harper again. The thought made him nervous in a way that tracking mountain lions did not. Zelda spent the afternoon in Mrs. Peterson's kitchen, helping prepare supper for the boarders and scrubbing floors until her back ached. The work was hot and endless, but she was grateful for it. Mrs. Peterson paid fairly and sometimes sent Zelda home with leftover bread or soup, small kindnesses that made survival possible. But all afternoon, she found her thoughts drifting back to the man outside the general store. Samuel Reeves. She had seen mountain men before. Rough types who came down from the wilderness to trade and drink and cause trouble. But there had been something different about Samuel Reeves. Something in the way he had looked at her dress with concern rather than contempt. Something in the gentleness of his massive hands. She shook her head, scrubbing harder at a stubborn stain on the floor. She could not afford foolish thoughts about a man, especially a mountain man who would disappear back into the wilderness and never give her another thought. She had her work, her survival to think about. Romance was for women who wore dresses that fit, who had dowries and prospects, not for women who lived on borrowed charity. "Zelda," Mrs. Peterson called from the doorway, "you have a visitor." Zelda sat back on her heels, confused. She never had visitors. "Who?" "That mountain man, Sam Reeves. He is waiting on the front porch." Zelda's heart did an unexpected leap. She stood quickly, smoothing down her awful dress, then felt foolish for caring how she looked. "Did he say what he wanted?" Mrs. Peterson shook her head, but there was a knowing glint in her eye. "Better go find out." Zelda wiped her hands on her apron and made her way to the front of the house, her stomach fluttering with nervousness. Samuel Reeves stood on the porch, hat in hand, looking somehow even larger than she remembered. The evening sun gilded his hair and cast his features in shadow, making him look almost mythical. "Mr. Reeves," she said, stepping out onto the porch. "Is something wrong?" "No, madam. I just—" He paused, and she realized with surprise that he looked nervous. This massive man who probably faced down wild animals without flinching was nervous talking to her. "I wanted to ask you something." "All right." He cleared his throat. "I noticed your dress does not fit quite right. Hand me down, I am guessing." Zelda felt her face flame with embarrassment and something close to anger. "If you came here to insult me, Mr. Reeves, you can leave right now." "No." He held up a hand, his expression stricken. "No, that is not what I meant. I am doing this all wrong." He took a breath, looking down at his hat and then back at her. "I bought some fabric, good blue cotton. I know how to sew, learned from my mother. I would like to make you a dress, Miss Harper, a proper dress that fits you right." Zelda stared at him, certain she had misheard. "You want a what?" "Make you a dress. Something new, not a hand-me-down. Something made just for you." He rushed on before she could speak. "I know it is forward and we just met, but I could not stop thinking about it. No woman should have to wear something that does not fit right. I have sisters and I want to do this, if you will let me." Zelda's throat felt tight. No one had ever offered her something like this, something new, something made specifically for her. The generosity of it overwhelmed her, even as her pride bristled at accepting charity from a stranger. "Mr. Reeves, I cannot accept such a gift." "Why not?" "Because I hardly know you. Because I have nothing to give you in return. Because—" She trailed off, not sure how to explain all the reasons why a woman in her position could not accept such personal attention from a man. "I am not asking for anything in return," Samuel said quietly. "I am asking to do something nice for someone who looks like she could use something nice. That is all." "That is not all," Zelda said. "You know it is not. People will talk. Let them talk. You will leave here and go back to your mountains and forget all about me, and I will be left here with people's talk and questions I cannot answer." Samuel was quiet for a moment, studying her face. "What if I promise not to forget about you?" Her breath caught. "You cannot promise that." "I can promise whatever I want." He stepped closer, and she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. "I can promise that I have not been able to stop thinking about you since we met this morning. I can promise that I would like to see you again and again after that." I can promise that if you let me make you a dress, it will not be the last nice thing I do for you if you will let me." Zelda's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "You do not even know me. Then let me know you. Let me make you the dress and let me take you to dinner tomorrow evening. Let me prove that I mean what I say." She knew she should refuse. This was madness, accepting such personal gifts from a stranger, allowing him to court her after one brief meeting. But something in his eyes, some sincerity she could not dismiss, made her want to say yes. Made her want just once to have something new, something made just for her. "All right," she whispered, "but I will pay you back somehow." "No need," Samuel said, but he was smiling now, a broad, genuine smile that transformed his rugged face. "I will need to take measurements if that is all right. Maybe tomorrow before dinner I can come to wherever you are staying. I am camped just outside town by the creek." "Do you know the spot?" She nodded. "Most of the mountain men camped there when they came to Independence." "Come at noon," Samuel said. "And Miss Harper, wear whatever you want. I will make the measurements work." He settled his hat back on his head, nodded to her respectfully, and walked down the steps. Zelda watched him go, her hand pressed to her chest where her heart was still racing. Mrs. Peterson appeared in the doorway behind her. "Well, that was interesting." Zelda turned to find the older woman smiling knowingly. "He wants to make me a dress, I heard. Sam Reeves is a good man, Zelda. Quiet, keeps to himself, but good. His word is solid. You know him. He has been coming to Independence for years. Never caused any trouble, always pays his debts, treats folks with respect." Mrs. Peterson patted Zelda's shoulder. "If he says he wants to make you a dress and take you to dinner, he means it. Question is, what do you want?" Zelda looked down the street where Samuel had disappeared. "I do not know. I feel like this cannot be real." "Maybe it is time you had something real and good in your life," Mrs. Peterson said gently. "The Lord knows you have worked hard enough for it." That night, Zelda lay in her small rented room, staring at the ceiling and trying to make sense of what had happened. She had lived so long on the edges of other people's lives, accepting their cast-offs and being grateful, that the idea of someone wanting to give her something new felt almost frightening. What if she accepted, let herself hope, and then he changed his mind? What if this was all some elaborate joke? But she remembered the earnestness in his eyes, the nervous way he had held his hat, and she found herself believing him. Samuel Reeves wanted to make her a dress. He wanted to know her, and tomorrow she would let him. The next morning, Zelda woke early and did something she had not done in years. She took extra care with her appearance. She washed her hair in the basin, working her fingers through the tangles until it shone. She did not have any ribbon to tie it with, but she braided it carefully and pinned it up as neatly as she could. She put on her least shabby dress, though it too was a hand-me-down, this one from her middle sister and at least closer to fitting properly. She worked through the morning at one of the houses she cleaned, her mind only half on the task. The lady of the house scolded her twice for being distracted, and Zelda apologized and tried to focus. But as noon approached, she found herself rushing through her work, earning another scolding. Finally, she was free. She walked toward the edge of town, toward the creek where she knew the mountain men camped. Her stomach was full of butterflies, and she kept telling herself this was foolish, that she should turn back. But her feet kept moving forward. She found Samuel's camp easily. It was set apart from the others, neat and organized in a way that spoke of a man used to taking care of himself. A small fire burned low, a coffee pot resting in the coals. His mule was hobbled nearby, grazing peacefully. And Samuel himself sat on a log, a bundle of blue fabric spread across his lap, needle and thread in hand. He looked up as she approached, and that smile crossed his face again, warming his eyes. "Miss Harper, right on time," "Hello, Mr. Reeves." "Sam," he said, standing and carefully folding the fabric. "Please call me Sam. Only if you call me Zelda. Zelda." He said her name like it was something precious. "Would you like some coffee? And I have some bread and jerky if you are hungry." She was, actually. She had been too nervous to eat breakfast. "Thank you." He poured her coffee in a tin cup and handed her a cloth napkin with bread and jerky wrapped inside. The bread was fresh, clearly purchased from the bakery in town, and the jerky was better than any she had tasted, seasoned with herbs and spices. They sat on logs near the fire, and for a few minutes they just ate in comfortable silence. "I started working on the dress last night," Sam said eventually. "Got the basic pattern worked out, but I need to take measurements to make sure it fits proper." Zelda felt her face heat slightly. Having him measure her felt intimate, personal, but it was necessary. "All right." Sam stood and retrieved a length of string and a piece of paper from his supplies. "I will be respectful," he said quietly. "Just tell me if anything makes you uncomfortable." He was gentle and professional as he took measurements, calling out numbers that he marked on the paper. The string went around her waist, her shoulders, down her arm. He knelt to measure from her waist to her ankle, his head bent in concentration, and Zelda found herself studying the way the sunlight caught in his dark hair, the breadth of his shoulders, the careful way his large hands worked. "You really know how to do this," she said, as he stood and made another notation. "My ma insisted all her children learn useful skills. My sisters taught me to sew, and I taught them to shoot and track." He smiled at the memory. "Ma said a body never knew what skills they would need to survive, so might as well learn everything." "She sounds like a wise woman." "She was, passed 4 years ago. I am sorry." Sam nodded, folding the paper carefully. "Your folks, dead, cholera back in '68. That why you wear hand-me-downs. No family to help." Zelda felt defensive for a moment, then let it go. He was not judging, just asking. "I have 2 older sisters. They took me in after, but they have their own families. The clothes are from them, from their daughters. They give me what they can." "But nobody ever gave you something new, something just for you?" "No." Her voice was quiet. "Never." Sam looked at her with such understanding and compassion that Zelda felt her throat tighten. "Well, that changes now. I have all the measurements I need. The dress will be ready in a few days." "A few days? That quickly? I work fast and I do not need much sleep." He gestured to the fabric. "I want to get this right, Zelda. I want to make you something beautiful." "I do not need beautiful. I just need something that fits." "You deserve beautiful," Sam said firmly. "And you are going to get it." They stood there, looking at each other across the small fire, and Zelda felt something shift inside her. This man, this stranger, believed she deserved beautiful things. Maybe it was time she started believing it too. "You said something about dinner," she said, surprising herself with her boldness. Sam's smile was brilliant. "I did. There is a restaurant in town, nothing fancy, but the food is good. I would like that." They ate dinner that evening at the small restaurant, heads turning as they entered. Sam, in his leather vest and worn clothes, looked exactly like what he was, a mountain man fresh from the wilderness. But he held the door for Zelda, pulled out her chair, and treated her with such careful respect that she found herself relaxing despite the curious stares. Over roast chicken and potatoes, they talked. Sam told her about his life in the mountains, about the cabin he had built with his own hands, about the long winters and the wild beauty of the high country. Zelda told him about her work, about the families she cleaned for, about the small dreams she barely let herself acknowledge, dreams of having her own home someday, her own things, a life that was not built on charity. "Why do you live alone?" she asked at one point. "In the mountains, I mean." "Did something happen?" Sam was quiet for a moment, his fork pausing halfway to his mouth. "Nothing bad if that is what you are thinking. I just never fit right in towns. Too many people, too much noise. I like the quiet, the simplicity. I can take care of myself, do not have to rely on anyone or have anyone rely on me." He paused. "Or I did not think I needed that. Maybe I was wrong." "What changed?" He looked at her directly, his green eyes intense. "You did. Met you yesterday morning and suddenly my cabin felt lonely instead of peaceful." Zelda's breath caught. "Sam. Too honest." "No, just unexpected." He reached across the table and after a moment's hesitation she put her hand in his. His palm was calloused and rough, but his touch was gentle. "I know this is fast. I know we just met, but I have never felt like this before, Zelda. Like someone knocked me sideways without even trying." "I feel it too," she admitted quietly, "but I am scared." "Of what?" "Of hoping. Of believing this is real. Of what happens when you go back to your mountains. What if you came with me?" The question hung between them, impossible and tempting. "You cannot mean that." "I mean everything I say." His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "Not right away, I understand we need time. But Zelda, I want to know you. I want to give you beautiful things. I want to wake up every morning and see your face. And if that means coming to town more often, if that means building a bigger cabin, if that means figuring out a life that works for both of us, then that is what I will do." Tears pricked at Zelda's eyes. "Why me? You do not even know me." "I know enough. I know you work hard and hold your head high. I know you are kind, saw it in the way you apologized for bumping into me even though it was not your fault. I know you are strong, because you have to be to survive the way you have. And I know you have been overlooked and undervalued, and that makes me want to spend the rest of my life making sure you know how precious you are." A tear slipped down her cheek, and Sam reached over with his free hand to brush it away gently. "Do not cry, darling. I am not sad," she said, laughing a little. "I am just. No one has ever said things like that to me. Then I will say them every day until you believe them." They finished dinner, talking more easily now that the truth was out between them. Sam paid the bill despite Zelda's protests, and then he walked her to her boarding house as twilight settled over Independence. At the door, he took her hand again. "I will come see you tomorrow," he said. "And every day after until the dress is done, and then every day after that if you will let me." "I want that," Zelda said, "more than I can explain." He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles, and the gesture was so sweet and old-fashioned that Zelda felt her heart melt completely. "Sleep well, Zelda." "Good night, Sam." She watched him walk away, her hand still tingling where he had kissed it, and for the first time in years, she let herself hope. The next 3 days passed in a blur of wonder. Sam came to see her every day, timing his visits around her work schedule. They walked along the creek, talking for hours. They shared meals. He told her stories about the mountains, about tracking elk through deep snow, about the way the sunrise looked from his cabin porch. She told him about her parents, about the things she missed from before they died, about the small kindnesses people had shown her, and the larger indifferences she had learned to navigate. And every evening, Sam returned to his camp and worked on the dress. Zelda had offered to help, but he had refused gently, telling her he wanted it to be a surprise. She had glimpsed the blue fabric once, seen the neat, careful stitches, but he kept it mostly hidden, working by firelight late into the night. On the 4th day, he came to find her at Mrs. Peterson's with a package wrapped in brown paper. "It is done," he said, and she could hear the nervousness in his voice. "I hope you like it." Mrs. Peterson, who had been watching this courtship with approval, shooed them both toward the parlor. "Go on, Zelda, try it on. You can use the back bedroom." Zelda took the package with trembling hands. It was heavier than she expected, the paper crinkling under her fingers. She went to the small bedroom at the back of the house and carefully unwrapped it. The dress was beautiful. The blue fabric was perfect, the color of a summer sky just like Sam had promised. But it was the details that made her breath catch. He had added a white collar, simple but elegant, and small white buttons down the front. The bodice was fitted, the waist seamed perfectly, the skirt full enough to move easily but not so full as to be wasteful of fabric. The sleeves were long and properly hemmed, and there was even a matching ribbon to tie around the waist. She undressed quickly, her fingers fumbling with eagerness. The dress slid over her head and settled onto her shoulders like it had been waiting for her. She fastened the buttons, tied the ribbon, and turned to look in the small mirror on the wall. It fit perfectly. Not too tight, not too loose, not sagging or pulling anywhere. The color brought out the blue of her eyes and complemented her pale hair. The style was simple but flattering, the kind of dress a respectable working woman might wear. Nothing too fancy but clean and new and hers. Hers. Made just for her. Zelda pressed her hands to her face, tears streaming down her cheeks. In 20 years, no one had ever given her something like this. No one had ever cared enough to see what she needed and provide it. No one had ever made her feel valuable enough to deserve new things. A soft knock on the door made her look up. "Zelda," Sam's voice concerned. "Are you all right?" She opened the door, still crying, and saw his face fall. "It does not fit. I can fix it. Just tell me what is wrong." "Nothing is wrong," she said, her voice breaking. "It is perfect." "Sam, it is absolutely perfect." His expression shifted from worry to relief to something deeper, warmer. "You look beautiful. I have never had anything so nice. You should have. You should have 100 nice things." He reached out and gently wiped a tear from her cheek. "This is just the start, Zelda, if you will let it be." She did not think, did not plan. She just threw her arms around his neck and hugged him tightly. After a moment of surprise, his arms came around her, holding her close against his broad chest. She could feel the steady beat of his heart, the strength in his embrace, and she felt safer than she had in years. "Thank you," she whispered against his shoulder. "Thank you for seeing me." His arms tightened around her. "Always, darling, always. Mrs. Peterson appeared in the hallway, took one look at them, and smiled. "That dress is lovely, Sam. You did fine work." Sam released Zelda reluctantly, stepping back but keeping one hand on her waist as if he could not bear to completely let her go. "Thank you, madam. Why do not you two go for a walk? Let folks see that beautiful dress." Mrs. Peterson's eyes twinkled. "And maybe do some talking about the future while you are at it." They walked through Independence, and Zelda felt like she was floating. People noticed the dress, noticed her, and for once the attention did not make her feel ashamed. Sam walked beside her, proud and protective, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back. They ended up at the creek, sitting on a fallen log in the shade. The water burbled past, sunlight dancing on its surface, and birds sang in the cottonwood trees. "I need to go back to my cabin soon," Sam said quietly. "I have been away longer than I planned. Need to check the traps, make sure everything is secure before winter starts coming on." Zelda's heart sank. She had known this was coming, but hearing it still hurt. "When?" "Day after tomorrow." He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "But I want you to come with me, Sam. I know it is fast. I know we have only known each other a week. But Zelda, I have never been more sure of anything. I want to marry you. I want to take you to my cabin and make a life with you. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep next to you every night. I want to make you 100 dresses, build you furniture, give you everything you have been denied. I do not know anything about living in the mountains. I will teach you, and you will teach me things too. We will learn together." He squeezed her hands. "I am not asking you to give up anything, Zelda. I'm asking you to gain everything. a husband who loves you, a home that is yours, a life where you never have to settle for hand-me-downs or charity again. You love me." Her voice was barely a whisper. "From the moment I saw you holding your head high in that awful dress, maybe even before that, like my soul knew it was looking for you." His eyes were intense, sincere. "I love you, Zelda Harper. Will you marry me?" She should be cautious. She should think it through. She should not accept a proposal from a man she had known for a week. But everything in her heart was singing yes, and she was tired of always being careful, always settling for less. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." Sam's whoop of joy startled birds from the nearby trees. He stood, lifting her with him, spinning her around until she was laughing and dizzy. When he set her down, his hands came up to cradle her face, and he looked at her with such love that she felt tears spring to her eyes again. "May I kiss you?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Please." His lips met hers gently, reverently, like she was something precious and breakable. But Zelda pressed closer, her arms winding around his neck, and the kiss deepened. He tasted like coffee and honey, and his beard was softer than she expected. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Sam rested his forehead against hers. "We will do this right," he said. "We will get married by a preacher, proper and legal. Tomorrow, if you want." "Tomorrow," Zelda agreed. "I do not need time, I know what I want." They walked back to town holding hands, already making plans. Sam would purchase a wagon and stock it with supplies for both of them. Zelda would tell her sisters and settle her affairs in independence. They would marry at the church in the morning and leave by afternoon. Telling her sisters was harder than Zelda expected. They came to Mrs. Peterson's boarding house when she sent word, both looking concerned and curious. When Zelda told them about Sam, about the dress, about the proposal, she watched doubt and worry cross their faces. "A week." Her oldest sister, Martha, said. "Zelda, you have known him a week and you are going to marry him and disappear into the mountains." "Yes, but you do not know him. You do not know what kind of man he really is. I know he is kind and honest. I know he sees me, really sees me, not just as a burden or obligation. I know he made me a dress because he thought I deserved something new." Zelda's voice was firm. "And I know that I love him." Her middle sister, Caroline, looked troubled. "We are just worried about you. What if something happens? What if he is not what he seems? Then I will deal with it. But I do not believe that. Sam is a good man." Zelda looked at both her sisters, women who had taken her in and done their best despite their own struggles. "I am grateful for everything you have done for me. Truly. But I have been living on the edges of everyone else's life for 5 years. This is my chance to have my own life, my own home, my own family. I am taking it." Martha sighed. "You are 20 years old, old enough to make your own choices. I just hope you are right about him." "So do I," Zelda admitted. "But even if I am not, at least I will have tried. At least I will have reached for something instead of always accepting what was handed to me." Caroline hugged her, and Martha joined in, and they stood there for a moment, 3 sisters who had survived loss and hardship together. "Be happy," Caroline whispered. "That is all we want for you." The next morning dawned clear and bright. Zelda put on her blue dress, the first and only new garment she had ever owned, and walked to the small church at the edge of Independence. Sam was waiting on the steps, dressed in new clothes himself, his hair neatly combed and tied back, his beard trimmed. He looked nervous and excited and impossibly handsome. Mrs. Peterson came to stand as witness, along with Zelda's sisters and a few of the families Zelda had worked for. The preacher, an elderly man named Reverend Thompson, conducted a simple ceremony. Sam's voice was steady as he made his vows, promising to love and cherish and protect. Zelda's voice shook slightly but grew stronger as she promised to love and honor and stand beside him. When Reverend Thompson pronounced them husband and wife, Sam kissed her sweetly, his hands gentle on her face, and Zelda felt a happiness so complete it was almost frightening. They loaded the wagon Sam had purchased, filled with supplies and the few belongings Zelda had accumulated. Her sisters gave her some household items, practical things like dishes and blankets that they could spare. Mrs. Peterson gave her a jar of her special preserves and a hug that felt like a blessing. "Be happy, dear girl," Mrs. Peterson said. "You deserve every bit of happiness this world can give you." By early afternoon, they were on the trail west, leaving Independence behind. Zelda sat beside Sam on the wagon seat, watching the town disappear behind them. She felt a flutter of nervousness about leaving the familiar, but Sam reached over and took her hand, and the nervousness faded. "Tell me about your cabin," she said as they rolled through the Missouri countryside. "It sits in a valley, surrounded by pine forests. There is a stream about 50 yards from the door, good clean water year-round. 2 rooms, though I will add more now that you are with me. A fireplace big enough to keep the whole place warm even in the deepest winter." His voice was warm with pride. "I built it myself, every log. It is not fancy, but it is solid and snug. It sounds wonderful. You will make it a home, I know you will." They traveled for hours, stopping only when night fell. Sam set up camp with practiced efficiency, building a fire and preparing a simple meal. He had purchased a tent in Independence and he set it up carefully, spreading blankets inside. "I will sleep out here by the fire," he said, even though they were married now. "Unless you want me to stay with you." Zelda felt her face heat, but she met his eyes. "We are married, Sam. I want you with me." His expression softened with love and desire, but also restraint. "Are you sure?" "I am sure." Inside the tent, with the fire crackling outside and the stars bright overhead, Sam made love to his new wife with a gentleness that brought tears to her eyes. He treated her like she was precious, asking permission, moving slowly, making sure she was comfortable and cared for. Afterward, lying in his arms with her head on his broad chest, Zelda felt a contentment she had never imagined possible. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. His arms tightened around her. "I love you too, darling, more than I can ever say." They traveled for 3 more days, moving steadily west into the mountains. The landscape changed gradually, the flat prairie giving way to rolling hills, then to steeper terrain covered with pine and aspen. The air grew cooler, crisper, scented with evergreen and clean water. Zelda fell in love with it. After a lifetime in hot, dusty Independence, the mountain air felt like a gift. She loved the way the trees whispered in the breeze, the way the streams chattered over rocks, the endless expanse of blue sky above. On the 4th day, they reached Sam's Valley. Zelda saw the cabin first, nestled among the pines like it had grown there naturally. It was larger than she expected, built from solid logs, with a stone chimney and real glass windows that must have cost a fortune to transport. A porch stretched across the front, and she could imagine sitting there in the evening, watching the sun set behind the mountains. "Sam," she breathed. "It is beautiful," he smiled, clearly pleased by her reaction. "Wait until you see inside." He helped her down from the wagon and they walked to the door together. Sam lifted her in his arms, carrying her over the threshold like a proper bride, and Zelda laughed with delight. Inside, the cabin was simple but well made. The main room held a large fireplace, a sturdy table with chairs, and shelves built into the walls. A door led to a smaller bedroom, which held a bed frame that Sam had obviously built himself. The mattress was simple but clean, covered with blankets and furs. "I will make furniture," Sam said, watching her explore. "A proper dresser for your clothes, more shelves, whatever you need. and I will add more rooms before winter. A larger bedroom, maybe a separate kitchen area. It is already wonderful, Zelda said honestly. I have never had a home of my own before, not really. Sam came to stand behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and pulling her back against his chest. It is yours now. Everything I have is yours. They spent the next weeks settling in together. Sam taught Zelda about mountain living, about where to find edible plants, how to preserve meat, how to read the weather in the clouds. She learned to shoot a rifle, though her aim was terrible at first, and Sam was patient as he corrected her stance and breathing. Zelda took over the cooking, experimenting with the supplies they had brought and the wild game Sam provided. She kept the cabin clean and organized, adding small touches that made it feel more like a home. She found wildflowers growing near the stream and put them in a jar on the table. She organized the shelves, mended Sam's clothes, and started planning a garden for the spring. At night, they lay together in their bed, talking and making love and learning each other's bodies and hearts. Sam told her more about his family, about the sisters he missed, and the mother who had taught him so much. Zelda told him about her childhood before her parents died, about the happy memories she had tucked away. I want to give you everything, Sam said one night, his hand stroking her hair as she lay against his chest. Everything you missed, everything you were denied. I want to spend the rest of my life making you happy. You already do, Zelda said, just by loving me, just by choosing me. Easiest choice I ever made. As autumn deepened, they worked together to prepare for winter. Sam cut and stacked firewood enough to last through the coldest months. They smoked and salted meat, preserved vegetables, stocked the cabin with everything they would need. Sam began construction on an additional room, working steadily on the structure even as the weather turned colder. Zelda had never worked so hard in her life, but she had never been happier. Every task had purpose. Every effort went toward building their shared life. She was not cleaning someone else's house or washing someone else's clothes. She was making a home her home with a man who loved her absolutely. One evening in late October, as they sat on the porch watching the sun paint the sky orange and gold, Sam pulled Zelda onto his lap. "Happy?" he asked, his arms secure around her waist. "Happier than I ever dreamed possible," she said honestly. "Thank you for seeing me that day. Thank you for the dress. Thank you for giving me a life. Thank you for saying yes," Sam countered, "for taking a chance on a mountain man you barely knew. Best decision I ever made." He kissed her temple, then her cheek, then her lips, soft and sweet. "I love you, Zelda Reeves." "I love you too." Winter came hard and early that year, snow blanketing the mountains by mid-November. But the cabin was snug and warm, and Zelda found she did not mind being snowbound with her husband. They spent long evenings by the fire, talking and reading the books Sam had collected over the years. Sam taught her to play chess, and she taught him the songs her mother had sung when she was young. During the days, Sam checked his trap lines and Zelda maintained the cabin. She learned to bake bread in the Dutch oven, to make soap, to tan hides that Sam brought home. Her hands, which had always been rough from work, grew stronger and more capable. By the time spring arrived, Zelda felt like she had lived in the mountains all her life. She knew the rhythm of the seasons, the patterns of the wildlife, the thousand small details that made life in the wilderness possible. More importantly, she knew her husband, knew his moods and quirks, his strengths and the few small fears he tried to hide. They planted a garden together that spring, working side by side to turn the soil and plant seeds. Sam had purchased seeds in Independence, and Zelda carefully tended the emerging plants. By summer, they had fresh vegetables to supplement their diet, and Zelda felt proud every time they sat down to a meal she had grown and prepared. One morning in early July, nearly a year after they had met, Zelda woke feeling queasy. She stumbled outside, making it behind the cabin before she was sick. Sam found her there, his face creased with worry. "What is wrong? Are you ill?" Zelda wiped her mouth, considering. Her monthly courses were late, had been for 6 weeks now. She felt tired all the time and her breasts were tender. She had been denying the possibility, not wanting to hope too soon, but the signs were unmistakable. "I think I am with child," she said quietly. Sam's face went through several expressions rapidly: shock, concern, and then pure joy. "Truly?" "I think so. I cannot be certain yet, but all the signs are there." He let out a whoop that echoed through the valley and lifted her in his arms, spinning her around carefully. "We are going to have a baby." Sam put me down. But she was laughing, her earlier queasiness forgotten in the face of his excitement. He set her down gently, his hands going to her still flat stomach. "Are you happy about this?" "Yes," Zelda said, and realized it was true. A year ago, she could not have imagined this, could not have dreamed of a husband who loved her and a child of her own. "Yes, I am so happy." The pregnancy progressed smoothly despite Zelda's worries. Sam became even more protective, insisting she rest more, not lift anything heavy. He added another room to the cabin, a nursery with a cradle he carved himself. He trapped extra furs to trade for supplies they would need, making a trip to Independence in the fall while Zelda stayed home, her belly now obviously swollen with their child. He returned with fabric, soft cotton in pale yellow, and he spent evenings sewing tiny garments for the baby while Zelda watched with amazement. This man, this strong mountain man who could fell a tree and skin a deer, sat by their fire carefully stitching baby clothes with the same patience he had shown making her dress. "You are going to be such a good father," she said one evening, watching him work. He looked up, his green eyes soft. "I am going to try. Want to give our child everything. Love, security, a home where they know they are wanted. They will have all that. How could they not with you as a father?" Winter came again and Zelda's time drew near. Sam was nervous, more nervous than she had ever seen him. He had brought back medical supplies from Independence, and he had delivered lambs and calves before, but the thought of Zelda in pain made him anxious. On a cold February night in 1875, Zelda went into labor. Sam stayed with her through the long hours, holding her hand, wiping her face with cool cloths, talking to her in a low, steady voice. When she cried out with pain, he looked stricken, and when she gripped his hand so hard her nails drew blood, he did not complain. Near dawn, their child entered the world with a lusty cry. Sam, who had been prepared to see 1,000 things go wrong, stared in wonder as Zelda held their son, cleaned and wrapped in the soft yellow blanket Sam had made. "A boy," Zelda said, tears streaming down her face. "We have a son." Sam knelt beside the bed, his large hands gentle as he touched the baby's tiny head. "He is perfect. You are perfect." He looked at Zelda with such love that she felt her heart might burst. Thank you for this gift." They named him Thomas Samuel after Sam's father and himself. He was a healthy baby, strong, lunged, and hungry, and he quickly became the center of their world. Sam was a devoted father, rising with Zelda in the night to help with feedings, walking the cabin floor when Thomas fussed, spending hours just holding his son and marveling at him. As Thomas grew, he became a perfect combination of both parents. He had Zelda's blue eyes and Sam's dark hair, her delicate features and his sturdy build. He was a happy, curious child, and their cabin filled with his laughter. By the time Thomas was 2, Zelda was pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was harder, and she was sick more often. Sam worried constantly, but the birth went smoothly, and their daughter arrived in the spring of 1877. They named her Margaret Elizabeth, after both their mothers. Margaret was different from Thomas, quieter and more thoughtful, but just as loved. Sam made her tiny dresses from soft fabric, copying the pattern he had used for Zelda's first dress. Watching him sew for their daughter, Zelda was reminded of that day in Independence when he had offered to make her something new, something just for her. "You ever regret it?" she asked one evening, as Sam stitched a hem and she nursed Margaret. "Leaving the mountains, going to town that day." "Meeting me?" Sam looked up, shocked. "Regret? Zelda, meeting you was the best thing that ever happened to me. But your quiet life, your solitude, was lonely. I just did not know it until I met you." He set aside his sewing and came to sit beside her, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. "I have everything I ever wanted right here. A wife I love, children I adore, a home filled with joy. Why would I regret any of that? I just want you to be happy." "I am happy. Happier than I deserve to be." He kissed her temple. "You gave me everything, Zelda, everything that matters." Life settled into a gentle rhythm. The children grew, Thomas adventurous and bold, Margaret sweet and clever. Sam taught Thomas to track and hunt, while Zelda taught him to read and write. Margaret followed her father everywhere, learning to identify plants and animals, showing the same gentle nature that Sam possessed beneath his rugged exterior. They made trips to Independence every year, the journey easier as the children grew older. Zelda's sisters were amazed at the life she had built, at how happy she clearly was. They spoiled their niece and nephew, and Zelda appreciated their love even as she was always eager to return to the mountains, to her real home. Sam continued to trade furs, but he also took on other work, using his skills to help new settlers build cabins and furniture. He was known as honest and reliable, and families sought out his help. The money he earned went toward small luxuries for Zelda and the children, toward books and fabrics and special treats. For Zelda's birthday every year, Sam made her a new dress. It became their tradition, and her wardrobe slowly filled with beautiful garments, each one made with love by her husband's skilled hands. She never wore hand-me-downs again, never had to make do with something that did not fit. Everything she owned was hers, made or chosen specifically for her, and the significance of that never faded. When Thomas was 8 and Margaret 6, Zelda found herself pregnant again. Sam was worried, given that she was now 30 and the pregnancy was harder than the previous ones. But in the spring of 1883, another son arrived, smaller than Thomas had been but just as perfect. They named him Henry, and he became the baby of the family, doted on by his older siblings and parents alike. The cabin had grown over the years, expanding to accommodate their growing family. Sam had added rooms and storage, a proper kitchen and a larger porch. It was no longer the simple two-room cabin Zelda had first entered, but it retained the warmth and love that had always filled it. On their 10th anniversary, Sam took Zelda back to the spot where he had proposed. The children stayed with neighbors, trusted friends who had settled in the valley below. Sam and Zelda rode horses up the mountain, finding a meadow filled with wildflowers. 10 years, Sam said, helping Zelda down from her horse. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday, and sometimes it feels like I have loved you forever." "I know what you mean." Zelda looked around at the beautiful landscape, at the mountains that had become her home. "Thank you for building this life with me. For making me see that I was worth more than hand-me-downs and charity. You were always worth more, you just needed someone to show you." Sam pulled her close, his arms strong and warm around her. "I love you, Zelda, today, tomorrow, and for all the years to come." "I love you too," she whispered against his chest. "Forever." They stood there in the meadow, holding each other, two people who had taken a chance on love and found everything they had been searching for. Around them, the mountains stood eternal, witnesses to a love that would endure just as long. As the years passed, their children grew into young adults. Thomas, strong and capable like his father, decided to stay in the mountains, building his own cabin in a neighboring valley. Margaret, with her gentle nature and quick mind, trained as a teacher, helping educate children in the growing settlements. Henry, the baby, showed an unexpected talent for music and spent hours learning to play the fiddle, filling their home with beautiful melodies. Sam's hair turned silver at the temples, his beard more gray than black, but he remained strong and vital, still able to work from dawn to dusk. Zelda found lines around her eyes and threads of silver in her golden hair, but Sam told her every day that she was beautiful, and she believed him. They celebrated their 20th anniversary with all three children and their families around them. Thomas had married a strong young woman named Anna, and they had given Sam and Zelda 2 grandchildren already. Margaret was courting a good young man who taught at the school with her. Henry was still young, just 16, but already girls in the settlement were noticing him. As they sat around the table, Sam stood and raised his glass. 20 years ago, I made the best decision of my life. I asked a beautiful woman in a threadbare dress to let me make her something new, and she said yes. Zelda, you have given me a life beyond anything I could have imagined. You have given me love, children, a home filled with joy. You took a lonely mountain man and showed him what it meant to truly live. His voice grew thick with emotion. I love you more now than the day I married you, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. Zelda stood, tears streaming down her face, and embraced her husband. And you gave me everything. A home, a family, a life where I knew I was valued and loved. You taught me that I was worth something new, something beautiful, something made just for me. I love you, Sam Reeves, with everything I am. Their children and grandchildren clapped and cheered, and the party continued late into the evening. But later, when everyone had gone to bed, Sam and Zelda sat on their porch, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. No regrets? Sam asked softly, his arm around her shoulders. Not a single one, Zelda said. You. Only that I did not meet you sooner, she laughed, snuggling closer to him. We found each other when we were meant to. That is enough. They sat in comfortable silence, the kind of quiet that came from knowing each other completely, from sharing a life built on love and trust. The mountains rose around them, dark shapes against the star-filled sky, and somewhere an owl called, hunting in the night. Inside the cabin, the life they had built together waited. Furniture Sam had crafted with his own hands, quilts Zelda had sewn, pictures drawn by their children when they were young. The cradle that had held all three babies now waited in the attic for grandchildren. Shelves lined with books they had read together, dishes they had shared countless meals from, memories woven into every corner, and in the bedroom, hanging in the wardrobe, was the blue dress. The first dress Sam had made for Zelda, the one that had changed everything. Zelda still kept it, though it was worn now and a bit faded. She could not bear to part with it, this tangible reminder of the moment her life had truly begun. Sam looked down at his wife, at the woman who had transformed his solitary existence into something rich and meaningful. She had been so uncertain that day in Independence, standing before him in that awful hand-me-down dress, trying to maintain her dignity despite her circumstances. But he had seen past the shabby clothing to the woman beneath, strong and proud and deserving of so much more than she had been given. Giving her that first dress had been simple. A few yards of fabric, some careful sewing, attention to detail and fit, but what it had represented was everything. It was showing her that she mattered, that someone saw her worth, that she deserved new things made specifically for her. It was the beginning of a courtship, a marriage, a life. "Do you remember the day we met?" Zelda asked, as if reading his thoughts. "Every detail. You ran into me outside the general store, apologized even though it was not your fault, looked at me with those blue eyes like you were daring the world to break you." Sam smiled at the memory. "I knew right then I was in trouble. I thought you were too handsome to be real." This huge mountain man with kind eyes, looking at me like I was worth looking at. She shook her head. "I tried so hard not to hope. Hope had disappointed me too many times. And now I hope all the time. I hope our grandchildren grow up healthy and happy. I hope Thomas and Anna have more babies. I hope Margaret marries her young man if he makes her happy. I hope Henry finds something he loves as much as his music. I hope we have many more years together." She looked up at him. "You taught me to hope, Sam. That might be the greatest gift of all." He kissed her forehead, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. "We will have those years," he promised. "I am not done loving you yet, not by a long way." The seasons continued their eternal cycle. Springs brought new life. Summers were filled with warmth and growth. Autumns painted the mountains in gold and red, and winters blanketed everything in peaceful white. Through it all, Sam and Zelda remained constants in each other's lives, partners in every sense of the word. When Sam's hands grew stiff with age, making sewing difficult, Zelda learned the skill properly and took over mending and making clothes. When Zelda's back ached from years of work, Sam insisted she rest while he handled the heavier tasks. They adapted, adjusted, supported each other through the challenges that age brought. Their children visited often, bringing grandchildren who filled the cabin with noise and laughter. Thomas's son showed the same love for the mountains that Sam had always possessed. Margaret's daughter inherited her grandmother's resilience and quiet strength. Henry eventually married a girl from town who loved his music, and they gave Sam and Zelda twin grandchildren who kept everyone on their toes. On their 30th anniversary, the entire family gathered at the cabin for a celebration. There were 15 people now, 3 generations, all descended from the chance meeting between a mountain man and a woman in a hand-me-down dress. Sam, now 62 but still strong, stood before his family. "I want to tell you all a story," he said, "about a dress and a decision, and how one moment of kindness can change everything." He told them about seeing Zelda that day in Independence, about noticing her dress that did not fit, about buying fabric and sewing her something new. He talked about the nervousness he felt offering it to her, about the fear that she would reject him. "But she said yes," Sam said, looking at Zelda with all the love he had felt then and more. "She let me make her a dress, she let me court her, she let me love her, and in doing so she gave me the only life I ever wanted." Thomas stood, raising his glass. "To my parents, who showed us all what love looks like. To my mother, who proved that sometimes the best things come from saying yes to something new. And to my father, who saw worth where others saw only shabby clothing and recognized a treasure." They all drank, and then Margaret spoke. "You taught me that I deserved to be valued, that I should never settle for less than someone who sees my worth. You showed me what a marriage should be, equal partners who lift each other up." Henry, now a man of 23, added his own toast. "You created a home where love was more important than anything else, where we learned that kindness matters, that seeing people truly matters, that small acts of generosity can change lives." As the evening wore on and the younger grandchildren were put to bed, the adults sat around the fire, talking and laughing. Sam and Zelda found themselves alone on the porch again, their favorite spot, watching the moon rise over the mountains. 30 years, Zelda marveled. Sometimes it feels impossible that it has been so long. Sometimes it feels like we have always been together. We have always been together, Sam said. We just did not meet until that day in Independence. She laughed softly. I love your romantic streak, always have. Only for you. He took her hand, his thumb tracing over her knuckles in a gesture so familiar it was almost unconscious. I meant what I said in there. You gave me everything, Zelda, everything that matters. We gave it to each other, she corrected. You taught me my worth, and I gave you someone to love. Fair trade, I would say. They sat together as the moon climbed higher, as the stars emerged in their millions, as the mountains stood silent and strong around them. Inside, their family slept under the roof Sam had built, surrounded by the love Sam and Zelda had created. The blue dress still hung in the wardrobe, a reminder and a promise. Zelda had never worn anything but hand-me-downs until Sam bought fabric and sewed her something new. But more than that, he had helped her see herself as someone deserving of new things, of love, of a life built on her own terms rather than other people's cast-offs. And in seeing her worth, she had helped him see his own. The lonely mountain man had found purpose and joy in building a life with her, in creating a family, in giving love freely and receiving it in return. As they finally stood to go inside, Sam pulled Zelda close one more time. I would do it all again, he whispered. Every moment, every choice, every day, I would choose you every single time. And I would choose you, Zelda whispered back. Always. They walked inside together, hand in hand, ready for whatever years remained to them. They had built something beautiful out of a chance meeting and a simple dress, something that would last long after they were gone. Their children would carry forward the lessons they had learned, the love they had witnessed. Their grandchildren would tell the story of the mountain man and the woman in the hand-me-down dress, and how one act of kindness had created a legacy. The fire burned low in the hearth, casting warm shadows on the walls. Sam banked it carefully while Zelda prepared for bed. They had done these small rituals together for 3 decades, the comfortable choreography of a long marriage. When they finally lay down together, Sam pulled Zelda close, her head resting on his shoulder where it had rested countless times before. "Good night, my love," he said softly. "Good night," Zelda replied, her hand over his heart, feeling its steady beat. They drifted off to sleep together. Two people who had found each other against all odds and built something lasting and true. Outside, the mountains stood guard over the valley, over the cabin, over the family that slept within. The stars wheeled overhead in their eternal dance, and the world turned on, carrying with it the story of a woman who had never worn anything but hand-me-downs, and a mountain man who bought fabric and sewed her something new, and in doing so, stitched their hearts together forever.